Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Crime Scene Insiders.
We're your hosts, Angela Davies and Dionne Watson, and we're going to take you underneath the barrier tape. This week, we're going to follow on from our first episode and discuss a little bit more about what it's like to be a crime scene investigator working for the police and some of the realities around that and what we face. I think maybe where a good place to start, Dee, would be with what constitutes a crime scene. A lot of people, I think they have an idea of what a crime scene is, but actually sometimes it encompasses so much more. We end up in lots of weird and wonderful places, I think, that people don't expect. Do you?
Yeah.
So I don't know what you think. What would you say constitutes a crime scene?
A good question, Ange. Very good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I say, I don't think people realise the remit of different places that we can visit. What constitutes a crime scene is the scene itself, but also actually all routes kind of in or out of it, which I think people don't consider as well. So, for example, if a crime scene was in a property, in a house, for example, the garden out the front, the pathways in and out of it also would constitute part of that crime scene. And I think people quite a lot associate places as being crime scenes. So,
Yeah.
like I mentioned there, a property or a vehicle, for example, but people can also be a crime scene. So if we have someone who's a victim of assault, for example, it's likely that we're going to get most of our evidence from the victim in that case, isn't it? So actually a person can be a crime scene, and that could be the victim, and also it could be the offender themselves.
Yeah.
We can deal with people or places, but we visit all sorts of weird and wonderful places as scene investigators. What would you say is your weirdest crime scene destination that you've attended?
Oh, that's tricky. Don't know if I can pinpoint my weirdest. I think following in from what you'd say, I'd say that what constitutes a crime scene as well is it's basically anything, anyone, or any place that can yields evidential value for the investigator. Visit a crime scene on a yacht.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
It was trying to get down to it, was interested in the marina, I remember. Also, a train in an old train garage that no longer was actually in function. Caravans up in lofts.
Oh,
In the
lofts
middle
are a favourite.
lofts, yeah. Especially when you've got a backside like mine, trying to get into some of the small loft crawl spaces. Like everything else goes through and my bum just stays out. Don't mind me. Where else? Just all over the place. Fields. I've done a lot of stuff in fields because I worked in a rural area when I first started. I'd often find myself just in the middle of a field.
What
Car
were you looking at in the
parks.
field, Ange?
Footwear marks.
In what?
Snow. Well, actually,
Interesting.
loads actually. Footwear marks in snow, footwear marks in mud. Often it was theft of diesel.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was in cow pat.
That's the one I was looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
She was avoiding it.
Footwear,
Yeah, we deal a lot with that,
mark in a cow pat.
unfortunately.
We do come across a lot of shit at times, don't we? In a number of
We
different
do.
contexts, actually. Yeah, I remember once I got asked to recover some shit at a scene, and the victim told me that the officer had told them that it would be of great evidential value. And when I looked,
Wow.
it was actually cat poo. And the
Oh,
cat
God.
had done it, and it must have been in the house and not been out for the day or whatever, but then actually walked through it. So there was just little paw prints. Cat shit everywhere. I was like,
Cat burglar.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to recover that. That's not going to
You
help
mean
us in this case at all.
You weren't going to run it through an animal database.
What's your weirdest place as well?
Oh,
Diverting us away from the shit stories. We've got a few. I'm
yeah.
sure they'll
We
crop
get
up
onto
more.
those a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
Like you say, it's difficult because it becomes just part of what you get used to dealing with, doesn't it? So then pulling them
Just
to mind sometimes is difficult.
you stop thinking of them so much as unusual. I've also done warehouses.
Oh, warehouses, a lot of them.
The back of the trucks are tankers. Down
Yeah,
by the side of the river. Under a
yes,
bridge. Down the
outdoor
river.
ones.
Yeah.
Done some houses as well where you think it looks quite small from the outside, and then actually they've knocked through a few to do a cannabis grow or something from, so it looks small from the outside, and you walk in and it's just huge.
About 3 or 4
Like,
houses
what's
knocked
this?
through.
Yeah, an interesting place for me as well as a football fan as well. I've ended up at the local football stadium in there taking photographs, which was interesting.
Oh, really? Did you forget you were there to work and get excited?
I got excited. I was actually really pleased because my boss at the time knew I was a Sunderland supporter as well for my sins. And that was our local, that's where I was based, and there was some disorder. And they'd wanted us to go along and take some photographs, but I got to go centre pitch and stand in the middle of the pitch and take photographs all around, which as a football fan was quite exciting because you're normally not
Yeah.
allowed anywhere near the pitch. So I was very excited with that one. That's not one I expected to do.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, but that was for you, like you say, as a football fan,
Yeah,
exciting.
I was very excited about it.
Well, I once did a sex shop.
Oh, that is an interesting one.
I don't know if that's the best phrasing. I did a sex shop. I attended a crime scene at a sex shop. It was interesting because they'd gone in from the back and they'd taken also inappropriate.
I was going to ask, what have they stolen from me? And
Gone in from the back.
I didn't even cotton on with that bit. Brilliant.
I might have to edit that out.
Definitely not.
They went in from the back of the building and they'd spent a lot of time. They must have been coming back for 2 or 3 nights to
No.
scrape out the great big, what do you call those great big concrete breeze blocks?
These blocks, yes.
They're great big breeze blocks, and they'd chipped away and eventually managed to remove a couple, and then got in and stole a lot of sex toys, underwear,
Wow.
lube. They took quite a lot of stock. It was quite a high value smash and grab.
Interesting, eh?
Yeah, it
What
was.
a one.
I mean, we did have a laugh.
Smash and grab at a sex shop.
Well, we were saying smash and grab, but I was like, but if they've been coming back and it's taken them that long to get the breeze box, it's not really a smash and grab, is it? It's been a steady,
Yeah, they took
steady
their sweet
break-in
time.
and then grab. Been loads of weird and wonderful places, just places you wouldn't expect to be. You can just be in your office and in your van one day, and then you find yourself in the middle of nowhere thinking, what am I doing here? I remember I ended up in the middle of rural Northumberland one night at a farmhouse, and there was literally nothing else around at all.
Oh, wow.
We were being called to a dead body there, and it was so creepy because there was no lights. It was a derelict building. Everything creaked. There was the floorboards were all falling through and were rotten. It was just a bizarre place, when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up and you're like, how do I get out of it?
Yeah, yeah. That sounds quite creepy environment, that one.
Yeah, it was. It was strange.
There is such an array of different places. Anywhere really that you can think of has the potential to be a crime scene, doesn't it, really?
Yeah. In fact, I don't think I realised when I became a crime scene investigator all of the different kinds of places I'd find myself in.
No. So we've talked quite a bit there about the different environments that we can find ourselves in and what constitutes a crime scene. Um, when we arrive at a crime scene, we have some procedures and processes in place, don't we, in a particular way that we have to examine the scene and go about our duties there. Do you
Yeah.
think it would make sense for us to talk a bit about the logical sequence and things that we go through?
Yeah, definitely. So the work of a scene investigator is quite methodical, isn't it, and logical. And
Definitely.
I think we always say the thing that changes all the time is the crime scene and where you end up. And but the process itself never actually changes. So whether we're dealing with what we call a volume crime, which would be like a burglary to a house or theft from a vehicle, which I think we touched upon in the last episode, or we're dealing with a major category crime, that process just never changes, does it? It's still the same. It just scales up or
Yeah.
scales down, or might have a couple more people involved. It's quite a basic process as well, if you think about it. It's just a step-by-step approach. So I often say if you have common sense or you have a methodical brain, you can work in a logical manner, you can be a crime scene investigator. The first step in the process, well, actually, I suppose it begins before we go out, doesn't it? Like,
It does really. Yeah.
we'd get into the office, and often it'd be a case of prioritizing what the workload is. We'd have a look at what crime scenes we had in and what staff we had on for the day, what areas we had crimes in, whether we had any urgent. So your workload would be prioritized. And then if we had time, you'd hope you have time. Sometimes we'd check on the system, the jobs, to see if there was any warning markers or any flags in case we needed any support from a police officer, if there was violence or weapons recorded to, if it was a property, for instance.
Yeah.
And then usually we check our vans, make sure the tyres were all right, make sure that it was filled with stock and kit and equipment that we needed.
Yeah.
Also making sure our kits were sorted. And then we'd usually kind of have a bit of a plan before we left for the day, wouldn't we?
Yeah. Not that it always stayed in place that long, but we had good intentions at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. You'd think, oh, I've got me 4 or 5 jobs. I'm just going to go out and do these. And then you'd hope for peace for the day, but then it'd all go a bit mental. You'd be
Then it
like,
would drop in.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're running around like a crazy person instead.
And I think what you mentioned there about doing your warning checks and things before you go is something that's quite often not thought about or overlooked, but it's a key bit for your own health and safety to bear in mind before you go out as well, isn't it? Because I'm sure we've both got loads of stories of times where we've rocked up at a scene and actually haven't been made aware of a warning marker or something, and you've turned up and thought, this isn't quite the safest.
Yeah, a few times. Can you think of anywhere that happened to you?
I've had a few where I've turned up and the person there hasn't been the nicest in terms of they've not seemed very happy that police are there, even though we've been called and we're going there to help with a crime at their place. And then afterwards, I've read things like they don't really like police, or they don't really like, in particular, women to do with the
No,
police.
really?
And then they've had a right attitude, and it's you've been to feel there's something quite off and not nice, but the in the main they've been okay, but just
Yeah,
it's something that should have been flagged and that actually
yeah,
probably shouldn't have been there as a solo female.
yeah. I remember once I went to a burglary and I didn't get the warmest of receptions, like you say, but the guy he was all right, and I managed to end up in the end having a bit of chat and a bit of banter with him, as you do. You try and break down barriers with no matter who you're working with, don't you?
Of course, yeah.
And did the job and I left. And then when I got back to the office, I got called in by the intelligence department, and they were actually observing him for drugs and gang crimes. And I
Oh,
hadn't known. So they wanted some photographs and information from me based on that, but I hadn't been told before I
oh,
went. I was not overly happy about that one.
dicey, isn't it? Because
Mm.
sometimes it's to do with the individuals that could be at the scene, isn't it? And then sometimes it's to do with the environment. So I had quite a few that would go out, and then for like some that come to mind are ones where somebody's went through a ceiling in a garage or something like that. And then you
Yeah.
get there and then the victim will say, "Oh, that roof's asbestos, by the way." And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I should have been told about that before
Before heading in there.
heading in there, because I definitely would have had masks, etc. on.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think, well, I suppose that's one of the things in the process, isn't it? It's PPE and personal protective equipment and the application of that. And often when people see things on the telly, everyone's always, well, actually, it's from one extreme to the other. Sometimes they wear nothing and they're contaminating a major crime scene, or other times they kind of got absolutely everything on, and it may be a bit unnecessary. But
yeah.
often in volume crime scenes, for instance, so if somebody had burgled and come through a ceiling, then um sorry, I've just remembered a job. Made me digress. It wasn't one of mine, it was one of our friends. Remember the burglary that they did where so this guy came through the ceiling, but as he came down, his back was pressed up against the window. It was a shop, a jewelry shop.
Jewelry shop,
And he
yeah, I remember
slid
them.
down the window and his bottoms came down and he left a bum impression on the window.
Yeah, brilliant
And they
one.
got DNA from his bum impression from that contact trace, isn't
Fantastic.
it?
Yeah, because they didn't get much else either, did they? Because he went in through, it was kind of in the display area of a jeweler's, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So he come in, took the jewelry and left. So he hadn't touched really
much at
anything other
all.
than what he'd stolen, except his
His
bum on the
trousers
window.
coming down. That's brilliant. I wish there'd been
Literally
CCTV footage
caught.
of that.
I know, yeah. Literally caught with your trousers down.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for instance, that job, because we were covering DNA, gloves and masks would be worn, and often we'd wear overshoes in case there's footwear marks. But you wouldn't put on full CSI suit, would you? The whole shebang.
No.
And whenever you're dealing with DNA, you wear gloves and masks, or any deal with any evidence actually. But a minimum's often gloves, masks, overshoes, and it's only really in the major crime scenes where we put on that full PPE application, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where we look like marshmallow men
Yeah, we don't just rock up to everybody's house in a crime scene suit.
in a great big mask, big respirator.
Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it?
I am your father. So I think we digressed a bit there. We were talking about the methodical steps. So we do the initial checks, health checks on the van, stock
Yeah.
equipment, any warning markers on the property that the police may already hold. Then we arrive. Do you want to take it from there? What's the next step from there?
Yeah. So when we get there, we usually have a chat with anyone in attendance, or
Mm,
we keep going back to a house, but I think that's because that's a lot of what you end up going to in the main, isn't
yeah,
it? So again, I'll use an example of someone's property. So if we got there, we would have a conversation with the. I keep going to use the word IP, and I'm trying not to because it's one of our technical terms, but it just stands for injured party or the victim. But
mhm,
we'll speak with the IP at the property and get an idea of what's happened, what might have been moved. We have to listen to that to help um, get a picture for us, but we always let the evidence guide us. So then we'll have a look, and we always do a visual examination first, don't we?
yeah,
So we'll have a look about, see what we're dealing with, get in mind the areas that we're going to target, that sort of thing. And then, as part of the visual exam, we'll start to record the scene. So, we'll usually start to take some photographs, and our photographs are quite, they're not for an artistic purpose, are they? They're for a storytelling.
yeah.
So, we'll usually do, again, using the property as an example, we do kind of photographs outside leading it in, and then we'll take photographs of the area. And then we'll take close-ups of different bits of evidence and things that we're going to be interested in or seizing from the scene.
Definitely. Just to step back from that, though, during that visual exam, we always do a risk assessment as well, don't we?
We do.
Or a dynamic, we call it dynamic risk assessment.
Yeah.
Often we'll get a briefing from officers as well. And so we'll be trying to think of potential risks before we even get there. But you can't really ever fully assess scene for risks until you can see it for yourself.
No.
So you during your visual exam, you will do that risk assessment, and there are a lot of health and safety considerations around crime scenes, I think. So that asbestos one you mentioned was a good one, but there's so many things for us to think about and be mindful of.
So many.
And I think that health and safety can be quite dry and quite dull of a subject sometimes, but actually when you apply it to crime scenes, it maybe not so much.
Yeah, it
I don't think
amplifies it a bit, doesn't it?
I don't think anything's drab or dull when it comes to crime scenes, personally.
Yeah. It's not your standard health and safety issues, is it?
No, definitely not. Most definitely not. Have you had any interest in health and safety issues while you've been in a scene? Sorry, I've just taken us off on another tangent, but anyway.
That's okay. I think it's an important part of it, though. Like we mentioned it prior to scene, but then, like you say, it changes so quick when you get there. So I'm going to come back to the interesting because I'm trying to think. um, but we have the standards, don't we, of like bodily fluids is a
Yeah,
big one. A crime scene's a huge one.
yeah.
That drugs.
Bodily fluids and
Uh,
bodily solids.
oh yeah, yeah. Bodily
Yeah,
solid. Yeah. Um, drugs, things we can inhale. Um, yeah, a lot like
accidentally
that.
ingest needles.
Yeah, shops. Yeah.
Mm,
Booby traps even. I've not actually
yeah,
come across any, but I've heard of quite a few in terms of where like electrics have been bypassed and things like
set up
that.
to explode or trigger.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah. How about yourself? Have you have any really interesting ones?
probably a few. I remember I once went to an arson scene, or the scene of an arson investigation, and is it called arson investigation these days, or fire investigation? Anyway, the
Either.
house had
Well,
burnt down, and
probably fire investigation because you don't know it's arson until the investigation has taken place.
that's true. But I know now that it was. It
Aha,
definitely
there
was.
we go. It's an arson.
Yeah, I went to an arson investigation scene, and we went with the fire brigade and the fire dogs, which was brilliant. But I
Amazing.
had to basically go up a fire officer's ladder to
Oh,
get to the top of the building to try and get photographs. And they were teaching me how to hook your leg over and in, so then your hands are
interesting.
free. Well, I'm not keen on heights, so I was not loving it. It was a interesting and good experience, but I have to say I was also shitting myself at the time.
I
I
bet
don't
you
mind
were.
admitting it was sweat. Like up this ladder, vertigo, like, but you got to do it, haven't you? It's your job. You're like, oh no, I'm not doing it. Well, actually, it's not true. We didn't always have to go above certain heights, but in this
Yeah,
case, it was with the fire brigade and it was safe. So actually, I did have to. And in the same scene, we had to lay planks down and around and try and walk and navigate the scene on planks that we were laying because everything was so badly burned. Once we got inside and electrics were hanging out, there's still sparks. So that was a really interesting scene. Without the
sounds it.
fire brigade there, we wouldn't have entered.
Wouldn't have gone in. Yeah.
And then one of my favourite stories of
I
all
know which one you're
time.
going to say. I loved it.
Did it? I once went to a cannabis farm, and it's always up to you, isn't it, as an individual, to make an assessment of your own health and safety and that of others. You look out for others, but you take responsibility for your own. You inform others, and then we take things from there. And I went to this cannabis farm, and there was a big grow up in the loft. It was all over, but there was some in the loft as well. And the officers that were there wanted me to photograph the loft, and I climbed up the stairs, had a look, and I could see the floorboards were absolutely rotten. And I said, no, I'm not going in there. It's not safe. And the police officer that was there at the time did not like this one little bit. And I got quite a bit of attitude. And I had, oh, do your job for you. Oh, all this malarkey. And I said, it's
Health
up
and
to you.
safety gone mad.
Health and safety gone mad. And I said, it's up to you, but I would advise that you don't go in there. And I personally am not going in there. I'll take photographs from the hatch, but I'm not walking through. So he snatched my camera off me and he goes, and all I hear is do, 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 do. So he walked across a few and then fell through. So all I could hear was a load of swearing and then these coppers' legs dangling through the ceiling.
Brilliant.
And I had zero sympathy.
I can't imagine that, Ange.
I think what I said was, my camera better be bloody all right. Hand me my camera back. I'm going to crack on with the rest of my job while you get yourself out of there. I mean, he wasn't badly injured.
You got some photos.
Do you know,
of his little legs?
I should have done, shouldn't I? Did it? He was not best happy, this man, I have to say. But I remember once I did get some. It was a cop. It was at the train yard I was telling you about, actually, in the middle of nowhere. There was a police officer there in a great big van, and he reversed, but into part of a creek that was running by. So there's a great big police van.
Oh no!
Stuck. Yeah, I took photographs of that. I was supposed to help.
Take some photos and then help.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. That road was not safely assessed before he started reversing, I can tell you that.
Brilliant.
Trying to think.
You're talking about the one with the ladder made us think of a weird and unusual one that I did actually for health and safety as well. This was I was outdoors, so I got a phone call. It was winter and it was just starting to snow as well. I remember that distinctly. And it was outdoors and it was actually a hanging. And they wanted us to get there quite quickly because it was at the back of a supermarket. It was a very bizarre one. It sticks in my head so much. It was the back of a supermarket, and you know the stairs that come from like the roof down, like the safety stairs, like a fire escape sort of ones. So it had a cage over it as well that protects people as they come down. I don't know if cage is the right word, kind of like a metal dome around it.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, to stop people falling or anything as they're coming down. And someone had actually hung themselves from the ladder up there, so they were kind of in that dome bit. But it was the car park behind, so they had to close the car park because it was members of the public would have been to see that as well. But obviously they couldn't remove the person until we were there because we had to take photographs of the ligature in place and stuff. But it was really bizarre because I had to try and climb up the ladder a bit and then try and hold the ladder and get a photograph, but I had to be quite like close to the but I couldn't get right in because there wasn't enough space, but I had to get up a bit and try and get photographs of the ligature and things in place. So it was really sad, and then it was just difficult in terms of a health and safety one because you're going up those ladders, but then you're also trying to hang with the camera, and then also, like I said, it started to snow and there were metal steps as well, so it was starting to get slippy. So it was an interesting one.
Yeah.
From all aspects.
Sounds like it, actually, yeah. You find yourself up quite a few heights, don't you, actually? And as I say, high.
Yeah.
Weirdly.
Yeah, it's a bizarre thing you don't really think of when you start out that you're going to need to have a bit of a head for heights.
Yeah. No, I didn't. Oh, I can tell you another one where health and safety went a bit wrong. I mean,
I think we could do a whole episode on this itself.
Probably, actually, couldn't we? Yeah, we should have thought about that. I'm thinking of one. I've told you about this before, where I was in the mortuary. So we were doing post-mortems. So as crime scene investigators, we do post-mortems, or some people might know them as autopsies. The autopsies are the American saying, isn't it? But it
Yeah.
seems to have infiltrated our language. We seem to use the word autopsy these days, but post-mortem effectively, where we in the hospital and we dissect somebody to see, we can find out what the cause and manner of death is. We don't dissect them, the forensic pathologist does. We work as photographers or sample takers or note takers, depending on what our remit is at the time. And in this particular post-mortem, I was the crime scene photographer. And this guy, he'd had a number of issues, and we came to look at his skull. And in his skull, he had a hole, and there was something strange growing out of the skull. It was almost like a cyst. It was growing up through, and then it came out like a bit of a bulbous shape.
You don't see that often.
You don't see it very often at all. And so everybody was interested. Everyone was like, oh, what's this? And the pathologist, of course, is like, okay, I'm going to take a sample from this. I'm not entirely sure what it is until we do some analysis on it. Can you get a photograph of it? So I go in close up, take my photograph, but then I'm still there having a good old look. And the pathologist puts in the scalpel to take a specimen sample, and it just bursts.
Oh,
And it's
God.
like a big load of pus, and it's just moving. So I start like running backwards, trying to dodge out of the way. And then this pus just landed. Now I
Oh,
was in
God.
full PPE. So I
Good
had
job.
suit on, hood up, 2 pairs of gloves, face mask, overshoe, you name it. Yet somehow this pus from this dead man's brain
Oh,
just, it
God.
wasn't, shouldn't say dead man's brain. It wasn't his brain necessarily. Although I think it was rooted and coming up through and through the skull.
Oh,
Anyway, still managed to land on the only small bits of face that I had.
oh, God. That is so
So
disgusting.
yeah,
So horrid.
it was. And the thing was, is all health and safety aspects had been covered in that situation. So you just
Yeah.
never know when something's going to go a bit belly up. Because it was the only exposed piece of me, like just tiny bit of forehead and tiny bit of cheek, the only exposed parts. And I managed to get a little here and a little here.
Oh,
Fortunately,
God. That's
I'd
so
closed my
horrible.
eyes and it didn't go into my eyes. But
Oh,
yeah,
I'd imagine.
I was shocked. I was like, oh shit. And
Oh,
then
God.
like, can you carry on taking these photographs? I was like, I'm just gonna go and wash my face first, if you don't
I'm just going to
mind.
wash.
I'm just
Yeah.
gonna go and wash my face.
Yeah.
Anyway, the story got back to the office before I got back to the office, and everybody was pissing themselves laughing. They took the Mickey out of me
Of
for
course they
quite
did.
some time. Yeah, it
Of
was.
course they did.
So see, even when you consider all health and safety aspects, doesn't always go right at a crime scene.
No. See, you've got to prepare for the unexpected. Just know that anything can happen at any time.
Yeah, yeah, really. You
Prepare
think
to
you're
be
in,
unprepared.
yeah, you think you're in control, but actually you're in control of nothing.
And nothing. Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
So, well, we did say health and safety wasn't that drab, didn't we? It is a big part of scene investigation.
Massive. And like we're saying, it constantly changes. So what you might
Yeah.
think is okay at one point, and then all of a sudden it's not. And then I promise this is going to be the last story for this section. But I was thinking of one we were at together, a health and safety.
Which
You
one?
you, I think you'll remember. Um, so myself and Ange were at a scene where it was a drugs raid.
Oh, yeah. That was
Yeah, and
brilliant.
starts laughing straight away. So this one, it was an empty house that
Yeah.
had the drugs raid was being done, a warrant had been served, and one of the household had been there when it was happening. The police had found a quantity of drugs. We were going to take photographs of where the drugs had been found, but also to take photographs of standard of living in the house for proceeds of crime, that is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Lifestyle.
that's it. I could not think of the terminology for it yet, the lifestyle photographs. So we were taking those and it was safe and secure. There was us, there was a search team of how many police officers were
I can't
there.
remember. There was quite a few
There was
at
quite a
one point.
lot.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot there. Anyway, so we felt quite safe. We're going around the house just taking these photographs. I'm stood in the hallway, and all of a sudden, the front door flies open. I got knocked through, like absolutely flying, didn't I?
Yeah.
I got knocked over with somebody who lived in the household who hadn't been home at the time come in, and he was raging
Was
about
going
his
mental,
house.
wasn't it? Well, he was the offender, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was the
Turned out.
offender. So he came back home and was kicking off and going wild at all of these police officers being there. I got knocked over. We weren't expecting this at all.
No, we were shocked, weren't we? Because I was just in the living room doing a bit of a search because you'd already photographed him there, and I was going through
Yeah,
and searching, wasn't I? And I
yeah,
think the search team at the time were in the kitchen working on some
yeah,
things around in the kitchen.
yeah,
You'd got knocked on your ass. I was like, what the hell?
yeah. I'll never forget this scene.
No,
And
me
then,
either.
and then what happened, Ange?
Well, he burst into the kitchen, didn't he?
He did.
And started going berserk at the officers. But I think there
Yeah.
was 6 to 8 of them, I'd say.
There was quite a lot. I think some were sat at the table doing notes, weren't there? And I think some of them were sat having the lunch whilst writing notes up of things as well, weren't
Quite
they?
possibly, yeah. But search teams, we called them, or they used to call them TSG.
That's
And
it.
to get into the TSG team, you used to have to be quite tall and broad, like built, weren't you?
Yeah.
And the sergeant, well, actually, I don't think he really batted an eyelid. I think he went in, shouted, and bawled a bit. And
Yeah.
the search team just got up and put him down, didn't they?
Yeah. Because the
And
sergeant
then
just said something like, lads, and they just got on him, didn't they,
that was
straight
it,
away?
yeah. Yeah, he walked, he ran in, started going berserk, and the sergeant, that was it. Sergeant just went, lads. And then they just pounced on him. And while he was on the floor, he was still going berserk and wriggling, wasn't he? The
Yeah.
sergeant leaned over and went, don't be a silly boy.
Yeah. It was
Don't
the
be a silly
funniest
boy.
thing I've ever seen. It was a silly boy then. It was like, oh my, it was like, oh my God. Yeah. So
But
we've
this
right enough
sergeant
of
was
attention,
about
but
7 foot, wasn't he?
he
Because he
was
came, and
huge.
you're, Dionne, she sat down on this, but she's not the tallest, eh? Me, I
5
had
foot
to
on
throw
the
it out.
dot.
You're 5 foot, and I think he must have been close on 7 foot. And then he stood over you, didn't he? And going, "Are you all right then?" You were like looking up at him.
Yeah,
And
I'm all
he's
right. I'm
going,
gonna crack on then.
he's looking at you like he's a silly boy. We told him not to. It's just like, what?
Yeah,
It's the
because
most
then didn't he?
bizarre scenario, wasn't it? Like it just all
It
happened in
was.
slow motion.
Yeah, but it was over in like it was literally seconds, wasn't it? But it
Yeah.
seemed so slow at the time. And then I remember the sergeant saying to him, all of these police officers here, and you're going to go on like that. And
Yeah.
he just spoke to him like a
He was
child
a
as well,
child.
didn't he? And it was like,
I
oh
mean,
God.
his behaviour wasn't great though, was it?
Yeah, I know. But we
It
thought
was
it was
so
hilarious.
speaking
But
to a
yeah,
grown man like that because he was speaking to him like he was a child.
yeah. But
Was
even in
this
that
boy?
one where you think it's safe, you're just in a
But
house
oh,
by yourself with all these police officers.
what could possibly go wrong? You got decked.
Yeah,
It was just all so confusing.
it really was.
It was a good one, that though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We
Well, we still
laughed.
chuckle about it all these years later, so
Yeah. Once we realised you weren't injured, we
yeah.
quickly turned to see the sergeant
I'm pleased I had the
berating this
camera.
guy. Yeah.
There would have been photographs of me on the floor somewhere if Ange had have had it.
Too right. The video of the whole thing. Took it back to the office. Oh my God, I've just thought of the best health and safety one you've got to share.
Oh, go on then. Right, we promise
Yeah.
this is our last health and safety one.
Go on, share yours on with the bus. You made an excellent call.
Oh
You
no.
made an excellent call.
How come
You
you're going
had
to make us share this embarrassment on episode 2?
just let people know what they're in for.
Oh, God. Okay, so this one, I'm just tying in with the health and safety because it involved a firearm, or so I thought.
Yeah.
So I was out in my little van and I had someone who was on placement with me as well. So we used to do attachments, we called them. So officers would come out with us and we'd show them our role so they knew what the forensic teams did and what we were
Mm.
capable of getting, etc. So I had someone with me, we were driving about, and then I thought I seen someone with a firearm over their arm. I thought it was a shotgun they were carrying. And then I said to the officer, I was like, was that what I thought it was? And they were like, I think so. So we turned round, drove past again. We were both convinced this person had a shotgun over the shoulder, just casually walking down the streets of Sunderland with a
As you do.
firearm, as you do, you know. Well, it was Sunderland.
Yeah. Not to upset
Um,
any Sunderland listeners.
I love Sunderland. um, but yeah, so anyway, pulled over, radioed in, said what we'd seen. They said, okay, can you keep an eye, keep it a safe distance, keep an eye, we're going to get some response down there. So we pulled across the road. There was kind of like a side street we could park in where they couldn't really see us, but we could see across. And then they went and stopped at a bus stop, which I thought was very, very bizarre. But they were stood in this bus stop anyway. And then we're keeping on the radio, comms going, saying what's happening. They're saying there's somebody coming down, coming down. And then a bus pulled up and they started to get on the bus, much to our distress.
Well, it's an armed
The off-
man getting on the
uh,
bus. Public
exactly,
safety, please.
exactly. And so casually as well, like there was nothing wrong with it.
Not a care in the world.
Not a care
Me
in
and
the
my
world.
firearm.
Yeah. The officer with us went to get out of the van and start going over. I'm like, what you doing? And then the police car came, blocked the bus.
So dramatic.
So dramatic. That I was pleased they were there, but then they got on the bus. We're watching, we can see like commotion through the windows, what's going on. And then we hear it come over the radio saying, all is safe and well. It is not a firearm, it is a fishing rod. So this poor
Brilliant.
person probably had a heart attack. All of a sudden, the bus getting stopped, police officers swarming on for him sat there with his fishing rod.
I hope they end up being one of our listeners that can message in and be like, you showed me up in public. It was me.
If
Email
it
us,
was you, I am
info@CSI
so sorry. So I obviously was mortified, just kind of sat in the van for a little bit thinking about what I'd done. and
Go
thought
think about what
about
you'd done.
the ridicule that I knew that was going to come the minute I set foot back in the station.
Without a
But
doubt.
because a firearms thing isn't that common, is it? So someone hears firearms over the radio and everyone's like, oh, what's going on?
Panic. Everybody listens.
Yeah, and at the time I was in a big office at the top. This is when I was a volume crime scene investigator, for those who were listening last week. And it was like a whole floor of the police station, one of the top floors, and it was a big open plan office. So I was dreading walking back in there. I kind of quickly walked in, and thankfully most people were out on jobs, got my stuff, and run away. Bravely ran away.
From the torture that
So,
was to come.
yeah, I didn't get in trouble or anything because it was the right
No, you
thing
did
to
the
do
right
if you
thing.
ever thought there was suspicion. But I was mortified. And all these years later, Ange still doesn't let me live it down. So,
Because it's hilarious. It's brilliant. But in fairness, though, that's health and safety. But you did the right thing. You called
did.
it. I mean, imagine if you'd not and thought, I bet that's a fishing rod, and then you went and shot someone. Like you'd be more mortified in that instance, wouldn't you? You'd be
Definitely.
devastated.
Yeah.
But it's still
Devastated
funny.
instead of just beetroot red.
Yeah, exactly. But it is
Thanks for
still
that, Ange.
funny. We said we were going to be brutally honest. Sharing
We
is
did.
caring.
And these are just the peak of the iceberg. I'm sure we've got a million more.
Yeah, I am. But I think we should draw a line under health and safety there.
I do. Yeah.
We could go on for days. Maybe we should do a full episode on health and safety scenes
See,
gone
when
wrong.
someone said, yeah, because when someone says that, I'm like, oh, how dull. But actually, as
Yeah,
we've just proved, that was not
not
dull
that
at
dull.
all.
Not
It was
that dull.
great.
Well, at least we don't think so. So we were saying, weren't we? We were talking about the kind of procedure and methods that we go through. And we were saying that we do the visual exam and health and safety is part of that visual. And then you talked about the photographs and said how recording the scenes our next step.
We really went off on a tangent.
We did. We went off miles away, didn't we? So if we've done our visual, we've done our health and safety, we've recorded the scene and done our photographs and taken whatever notes we need to.
Yeah.
Because we take what we call contemporaneous notes, so we always try and take them at the time as we're
We do.
examining the scene, or as soon as practicable afterwards if we can't do them at the time. But it's so important in a crime scene that you know everything that you're kind of doing and why you're doing it and taking it, because you've got to justify what you're doing and why, whether you take a piece of evidence or you don't take something potentially.
Yeah. And they really help us later on, don't they? If it ends up going to court or anything like that, the notes help us do statements, and then they also help us to present it in court and show people everything that we've seen, really, doesn't it? To build
Yeah,
up that picture, doesn't it, for people?
definitely. And we're always trying to maintain integrity, aren't we, from the crime scene to the courtroom. So integrity of evidence starts with us. So it's so important that we record everything from the outset for those court purposes, like you say, so we can then show it to a jury or to a magistrate, and also to make sure that we've maintained the integrity and continuity of evidence from the crime scene to the courtroom as well.
Yeah.
So after we've done our pictures, what do we do next? I'm asking you because I can't remember. No,
So then we will start to look at the evidence that we're going to recover. And with this, we just start to look at evidence that we can recover without introducing any contaminants into the crime scene. So we look at recovering our using non-destructive techniques, we call this bit, don't we? And this
Yeah.
is any evidence that we can take away from the scene without introducing anything else in there. So after we've got all of our evidence that we think we can with the non-destructive techniques, then we'll start with what we call our destructive techniques, won't we? And our destructive techniques tend to be when we introduce something like a powder, for example. So if we are looking for fingerprints or if we're looking for footwear, something, where we're introducing a powder to the scene that causes contamination, then we will start with that process. Tend to be latent, don't they? So non-visible to the human eye, and that's why we need to introduce something to develop them so that we can see them ourselves.
Yeah,
As you say.
definitely. Yeah, so it's the latent evidence, isn't it, which is usually fingerprints and footwear. We might have an idea of where an offender's been, like on a countertop or in a route through a property, for instance, but we can't see for definite. So we're always mindful of like where we're walking or what we're touching, and we'll be recovering those evidence until we bring in our powders and we use them in the places that we think the offender's been, and more often than not, because you become experienced at it and you tend to know patterns of offenders and how they move around a scene, and also you can tell often where they've been if they've trashed stuff or taken stuff from specific places. You can get a good gauge of what you think will be handled or whether we'll have had to stand, can't you?
Yeah.
Now maybe the process is in itself a bit drab, actually. People think it's exciting, but that's it, isn't it?
And that's it, like you
Visual.
said earlier, doesn't matter what scene you're at. And although every scene's different, and you'll find different types of evidence in different locations, etc. That's the process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Health and safety, visuals, photographs, non-destructive, destructive, final checks.
Final checks and walkthrough. Hope you haven't thrown your powder all over someone's cream carpet, Dionne.
Oh, thank you again.
Always put your kit away properly.
Yeah, the powder is interesting if you're not careful with it, isn't it?
Can go everywhere.
Yeah, you've got to be very careful with that.
The
So,
process itself is a bit, like you say, drab because it's straightforward, but I think what makes it so interesting and enjoyable is, like you just said, every scene's different. The
yeah,
evidence type you'll be finding is different. Occasionally, you might have to come out of that sequence, or you won't come out of the sequence. You'll still do every part of that process. You might have to do some of it in a different order for whatever reason. You've got to be able to think outside the box because you can't always recover everything in quite a straightforward manner because of the environment. Or
yeah.
a lot of people see it on the TV and think that it's a really glamorous job,
Oh, yeah. And
and
it is
actually,
not, is it? From
no.
Angie's brain puss story, as you can tell. Not not so glamorous.
It's not glamorous at all, is it? I think that some of the TV shows, particularly the CSI ones, the American ones, they started out years ago. They
Yeah,
had that impact in the called the CSI effect, where crime scene and forensics became massive,
yeah,
and people were so interested in it. But then also it had massive knock-on effect because people started thinking that they knew how to do your job and that they knew best. And so you'd turn up and they'd start telling you what to do and how to do it.
yeah,
So there's that effect, but also then a mass influx of people wanting to get into the industry, but thinking
yeah.
that it was something that really it was not.
Particularly when, like you mentioned, the CSI shows and things, particularly the American ones, like you see them turn up in these lovely cars. They're in suits and high heels and posh sunglasses and yeah, not a hair out of place, pristine makeup. And you're like, yeah,
And they're
that's just not
wearing
happening.
business suits, and all the women have high heels on and
Yeah,
makeup perfect, hair and nails perfect. And you're thinking, you've never been in a crime scene in your life.
yeah, exactly. So there's the glamour side of it, isn't there? Like you say, that is not correct. I mean, those vehicles as
Oh,
well.
yeah. We used to drive around in bloody little noddy transit vans. And they're
Transits, yeah.
driving around in great big SUV things.
Yeah.
Like, why haven't I got one of them?
I mean, they would have come in handy in some of the rural environments, wouldn't they? But
Most definitely, yeah. I once actually had to get the police Land Rover to come and get me from somewhere because I got stuck
oh my
up
God.
in rural Northumberland. Yeah, needed help.
You need a lot of help.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
Uh, yeah, so I think it's an interesting thing, the reality side of it that you were touching on there. The in terms of there's the side where people think it's all glamorous and it's not.
Mm,
There's also I think the technologies sometimes that you see on these shows.
yeah,
So someone will take a fingerprint, they'll go back, they'll stick it on the computer, you'll see it whiz through on the screen, and then all of a sudden there's a photograph and name and address of the person. Like, this is them. It's like,
yeah, within
that
like
would
two
be nice,
minutes.
wouldn't it?
Actually, DNA analysis really takes weeks unless you pay through
Yeah,
the nose for it.
yeah,
You can pay for a
yeah.
24-hour turnaround if you're lucky, can't you? But you've got to pay.
Hey, it's a lot of money. Yeah.
Mm,
I think some of the technology is a lot more excitable in the shows than what we have in real
definitely.
life,
I
isn't
mean,
it?
it'd be great if it was true.
It'd be amazing, really amazing. And I mean, we've come a long way, but
Yeah, definitely.
we're
But
not
not quite
quite
there.
there yet, are we?
No.
And then also, what do you think about how it portrays the role of a scene investigator?
Well, I don't think it really does
It
because
doesn't, does it?
usually there's one person that's doing everything, isn't it? So one person will rock up to the scene, then
Yeah.
they'll go back to the lab and they'll do the analysis, then they'll go and do the arrest, then they'll interview the suspect. And it just is not like that in reality.
No.
In reality, you're part of a big team and there are so many different roles within investigation. Literally, one person couldn't do it all.
And they couldn't, could they? But I think people are shocked that how different that role actually is, aren't they? So as scene investigators, we would not get involved with interviewing
No,
anyone at all. We wouldn't get involved with the process really outside of going to the crime scene, recovering any potential evidence and reporting what we've found there and kind of suggesting what needs to be sent off for analysis. But we
Yeah.
wouldn't touch any analysis or anything like
No,
that either, would we?
definitely not. So I suppose within investigations, you've got lots of different roles, haven't you? And lots of different, sometimes we work with a lot of external agencies as well. So there's so many different people involved depending on what the case is and the size of the case and what evidence you have, isn't it?
Yeah,
But yeah, I don't think
definitely.
that's portrayed on the TV. I also think it's funny because you talk about the CSI effect, and there was that one in terms of the influx of people wanting to get into the profession. Then there's the one on the general public who were thinking, why aren't you doing this, or why aren't you doing that, or you should be able to get DNA from this, or that kind of thing. But then the other
Yes,
one, actually, from the police as well.
some of the
I,
police officers.
I think, yeah, the police officers, I think their expectations were often quite high because of some of the dramatizations as well. And they'd
Yeah,
expect a lot more from us. And do you remember that word that was picked up, forensicate? Can you go and forensicate?
favorite word.
Can you just forensicate this for me, please?
And did you find it was usually to do with a vehicle?
Vehicle, yeah. Can you
Could you go
forensicate
and
this?
forensicate this? And you're like, what
Yeah.
does that mean? What
Can
do
you
you mean?
please
Can I
give?
forensicate this? And usually, I think it was a term used when they didn't actually know what they wanted, and that was the problem.
Yeah,
They
they
didn't
weren't
actually
sure.
know what they wanted, so they just said, "Can you forensicate it?" Because I think they thought it was all encompassing. So
Yeah,
whatever you can do, can you do within that remit? And it's like,
yeah.
no. What's the circumstances? What's our points to prove? Yeah, that was always a really lovely term when you heard that, didn't you?
Yeah. Give us some context first and we'll see what we can do.
Context, please. Because of what this show shows, what the shows show that we can do, like you say, there's a lot of confusion around it. And I'm sure us and all other practicing CSIs will have examples of things they've been asked to do
Yeah.
that just blow our minds.
You
Have
got
you
any
got
examples?
any? Yeah, I was just going to say, have you got any favourite examples of things you've been asked to do that are just,
Well, I started off with the cat shit one.
oh, you did. You did start.
Recovery, I should stop swearing. Recovery of cat poo for DNA analysis. I don't know what it was going to
Yeah,
prove, but
yeah, yeah,
that's a fine example.
I mean, because that one, there's so many aspects of it, isn't there? I mean, first of all, you
The
think we
cat
have a database of
Well, first of all, the cat had legitimate access.
access. Proves
He
nothing.
did not.
It didn't get a good breakfast. It had a dirty dirty protest.
Stuck in the house for too long, it was fuming.
Yeah, there's so many aspects of that that you just like, okay, no. Yeah,
Yeah, our animal DNA database that we just whip out.
that we whip out all the time. Yeah, I had one that involved animal poo as
Did
well.
you?
That that always comes to my mind in this as well. And it was somebody's house had been targeted, and somebody had sprayed graffiti all over it. Um, they thought that they were a paedophile, and
No.
they'd sprayed that over the front of the house, and then proceeded to get a load of dog poo and post it through the
Oh,
letterbox.
nice.
Yeah. So I was asked to go along and photograph the damage for the criminal damage to the property. But then also the officer had told them to keep the poo to one side for me and that I would take it
I bet you were over the moon
away.
to get there and
So pleased that the victim had saved this wad of poo for me coming along. It was not a little amount. I was thinking like either how big is this person's dog or how many dog waste bins have they been around collecting from?
collecting
Because
it. Oh,
that was
that's
a lot.
disgusting.
So much. It was in the summer as well, and it was
Whoa.
particularly stinky. Yeah, it was not
Oh, that is
nice.
gross.
Yeah, but the officer had told them that I would take that away, and I was like, for what?
To
For what
forensicate it.
purpose? Forensic it. So I spoke to the officer afterwards and had to give them advice along the lines of, that's no.
Just
And
never going to
we
happen.
we cannot take feces away like that. We cannot get a sample from it.
No.
we don't have animal databases. And actually, people are often quite shocked that even if it was human, poo is not a good source of DNA, is it, Ange?
It's not a brilliant source, no. Unless somebody's got a problem and it contains blood.
Blood.
You would have to go digging around for it though. But
Or what
also
else would the poo have to have?
it'd have to be nice and fresh and have its mucosal lining.
Beautiful.
But still you wouldn't get DNA, you'd get a mitochondrial DNA. So that
Yeah, it wouldn't be
it'd be from the
great.
mother's line. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
a DNA profile to that person.
So yes, that's always an interesting one when we get asked to take that.
I think that our stories about shit kind of round up nicely the reality versus the drama series, because I think it
Yeah.
just highlights how unglamorous the job is
Yeah, because
specifically.
you've never seen that on one of the shows, have you?
No, that's very true. You haven't.
I've seen someone take fingerprints from a tortoise shell on one of the TV shows.
Have you really?
Yeah,
That's not. That would not be
CSI.
possible.
No, it would not. There was a lot wrong on that episode. But yeah, but you never have I seen them handle dog poo.
Maybe for one of the shows we should do some CSI watching, just rant and rave, because we're not actually allowed to watch CSI shows, are we, in homes?
No, and that was a perfect example of the last time I watched one with my mum. She had it on when I came in. I was like, what is this?
What a load of nonsense.
Yeah, I left the room when they started lifting fingerprints of a tortoise shell, a live tortoise. Not that it makes any difference, but
Like, I can't watch this.
yeah, so there's a hell of a lot of differences, isn't there? The reality of the job is that it's fascinating. It's
Mhm.
different every day. You never know what you're dealing with. It's gross at times,
Yeah, very.
but I think your interest gets you through.
It does. That's it, isn't it? It's the interest that drives you, the fascination,
Definitely.
and sometimes the what the like what's going on in life?
So
How am
many,
I in this situation? Why
so
am I
many
here?
memories, isn't there?
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, I think that's given people a good kind of, or at least a brief perspective on some of the things those CSIs get up to.
So I think that's probably a good point for us to round up this
Wrap up
episode,
this one.
really, do you?
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you
So,
for listening, everyone.
yeah, thanks for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it.
We hope to catch you on the next episode.
Yeah, where we'll take you back under the barrier tape.
Bye.
Bye.